And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the July general meeting of Third Act Sacramento, which is one of the working groups, 30 or maybe even 40 now across the United States, started by a national group by Bill McKibben and some others. So people write me all the time, which I love hearing from all of you. And some really constructive advice I got was to welcome new folks. So if this is your first time or even your second time coming to a Third Act meeting, and if you would like to say hello in your name, now's the chance to say hi.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Maria Pinto, I think it's been a while. I think I might have gone to the very first, but I've been involved a little bit on the outside with the national and the local, and I've been involved a little bit with the SAC Climate Coalition and others, and also getting very much last year and a half with a group called the Resilient Activist out of Kansas City, Missouri, which is a group, uh, just a phenomenal group that it's bringing people to deal with and help with eco-anxiety, burnout, grief, the whole bit. It's pretty phenomenal. So kind of on the sidelines. I can't be out too much doing certain things with physical limitations, but I do want to stay in touch, learn more, connect, and get involved as I can. Just happy to be here.
Thanks, Maria. Does anyone else want to be brave and say hi?
I'll say hi. Patricia Chadwick from Sacramento. And I've been to a couple postcard events and some other meetings, but I also am involved in another group called Justice for All Network and some local Sacramento stuff. I'm working on Flo Kofer's campaign for mayor.
Any other first timers want to say hi? It's not required, just,
Sure.
Okay.
Bradley Cleveland. I just moved to Sacramento in the winter. And what else are you asking? So I got here late.
No. Just I was encouraged to welcome newish members. So if you wanted to say hi.
Yeah. And I'm worked with labor for my career and doing still some work around solar with IBEW and doing some volunteer work with Seed the Vote for Get Out the Vote work.
Sounds like you landed in the right place.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Raylene?
I just think I'm so glad that you did that, Diana, and I'm so happy to see you, Maria, and where did the gentleman go? Miss Chadwick and the fellow that just spoke. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're all here, and everybody else that Laura, I don't recognize you. I'm happy you're here. All the new people that are here and have only been here a couple of times, we're so happy you're here. So thank you. Thank you for doing that, Diana.
Thanks, Linda. She's a good coach. Okay, so our monthly meetings we kind of have several purposes. One is kind of education and to stay up to date on the issues that Third Act is committed to, which is protecting the climate and democracy. And so typically the first half of our meeting is a guest speaker, and we have an excellent guest speaker who I'll introduce in just a minute. And then the second half of the meeting is more kind of the nitty gritty. The Zoom meetings are great, but the action really happens at the team level. And we have multiple teams and team leads who work on a variety of projects, whether it's state legislation, climate finance, get out the vote, voter registration, and some of the internal stuff we need to succeed as an organization, like communications and volunteer recruitment. So if you're not already on a team, that's a chance for you to kind of learn all the things we do, which is a lot, and how you might want to plug in, beyond these Zoom meetings if that's of interest to you. And so that's kind of on the formal part of our agenda. And then we always have an after party from 7 to 7:30. And we know that not everyone wants to stay, but if you want to stay, it's more discussion oriented. And we have a theme, although honestly, we can talk about almost anything, especially for new folks if you have questions. But the theme for this tonight's after party is get out the vote, and particularly phone banking. Our working group has had remarkable success in doing postcarding, which research shows is an important strategy to get out the vote. But phone banking and canvassing, our membership is a little less enthusiastic about that. And so we're going to hear from Luke Wilson, who's done a lot of phone banking. And if you're thinking about it, but it seems kind of scary or creepy, or if you're worried about somebody yelling at you or hanging up, you know, no question is too basic to ask. And Luke will help us hopefully get over some of our fears during the after party. So before we start the formal agenda, I'm just going to start it with good news, because that's what I do, and we don't hear good news often enough. So I will remind you that at the end of June, the oil industry revoked or withdrew their referendum for the November ballot, which was written in an extremely confusing way and was intended to undermine a California law that was passed in 2022 that would ban new oil well drilling near homes and schools. It was kind of an outrageous referendum to begin with, but there was an amazing coalition and a lot of money behind the effort to convince the oil industry that they would never win, even if it was on the ballot. And at the 11th hour, they realized that polling showed that they had no chance of winning, regardless of what they invested. So people power really matters, and what you do really matters. So, you know, just something to think about, as sometimes we get discouraged with the bad news. So with that, I will introduce third actor, yay, and environmental scientist Karen Randalls, who's our featured speaker for tonight. I'll just say very briefly that Karen was the senior environmental scientist at the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, which we affectionately call OEHA. Karen worked on the 2022 report called Indicators of Climate Change in California. This is the 4th edition, so it's not a new issue for the state of California, but this is the most recent report. And I'll spotlight Karen, so we'll have her right in the center. And I know we'll learn a lot from her presentation. So you can go ahead and share your screen now, Karen.
This is the first time I've done this on Zoom, so bear with me. So I need to get to my PowerPoint. Here we go. Do you all see it?
Not yet.
You're not seeing it.
So let's see.
Let me try again.
Yeah. So you see the green share screen button at the
Yeah,
bottom?
I'm
Okay.
clicking on it, but I need to move you. See, I'm clicking on my PowerPoint and I'm
You
looking
need
at
to
it.
make her co-host at all?
No, and then at the
Oh.
bottom of your screen, there might be a message that says share. There's one final step you might be missing.
Jeez. Oh, you're right.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, and now I'm going to make this a full screen. Let's see.
It's full enough.
Okay. Okay. Now, are you seeing the full screen without the stuff on the top, right?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, okay. All right. As Diana had just said, this is the 4th edition of the series of climate change indicator reports. The first one was in 2009, and honestly, many people didn't even think climate change was impacting California. So we've come a long way. Indicators are scientific measurements that track trends and conditions relating to climate change and its impacts. They collectively portray a statewide picture of climate change impacts on people and the environment. There are 41 indicators in this edition. And we did not do this. Are you seeing this scroll? Are you seeing the second slide?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure. We've been collaborating with many entities, including the universities, state and federal agencies, NGOs, and then 40 tribes actually contributed to this document. So you'll see familiar logos here, the UCs, the NOAA, CDPH, excuse all the acronyms. Hopefully you folks are familiar with most of these. And then of course, Audubon. And so we were so fortunate, and these people were so happy to give us their data, share their data with us, and help us write the indicators, because they're technical. These are technical pieces of information. So if I'm using acronyms or anything that you don't understand, pipe in. Okay, so again, what we're showing are past observations, what has happened in California. So we're using data sets that go back in time. And this informs projects which are now making projections. What's going to happen when sea level rises to a certain extent? What's going to happen when our forests have changed dramatically? That sort of thing. So it feeds into the projections and the modeling that people are doing now. And then what is the state doing about climate change? Well, they have a mitigation plan, a 2022 mitigation scoping plan that lays out a path to reduce GHG emissions by 85% below 1990 levels by 2045, quite ambitious. They also have an adaptation strategy updated every 3 years, where we are trying to build a climate resilient economy and also protect vulnerable communities from climate impacts. So these folks have relied on our report in these plans. Okay, so the report has 5 sections for indicators: changes, climate change drivers, changes in climate, impacts on physical systems, vegetation and wildlife, and on human health. And you'll see in the center table here these 6 or 5 sections, and then indicators within the sections. For example, the drivers include greenhouse gas emissions and concentrations, changes in climate, of course, temperature, precipitation, drought, those sorts of things. Physical systems are all water systems that warming is affecting. Glacier change, Lake Tahoe water temperature changes. Coastal ocean temperature, we'll look at that. And then impacts on vegetation and wildlife include a host of things, a lot on our forests, what's going on there with wildfires and changing in the characteristics of forests, and even marine algal blooms, what's going on in the ocean. Wildlife, changing ranges for critters, changing migratory patterns, populations in the oceans of different marine organisms. We'll talk about Chinook salmon, and then impacts on human health, of course, heat-related deaths, illnesses, valley fever we'll talk about, and wildfire smoke. So let's take a look at a first indicator. Oh, indicators, by the way, each one of them in the large report is about 6 to 10 pages. And they'll show a metric, which is usually a graph, say what it's telling us, why is it important, what factors influence this indicator, and then characteristics of the data, the quality and the strengths and weaknesses. So here we have atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations. We're showing a global background station off of Mauna Loa, Hawaii. And you'll see since 1958, concentrations were 315 parts per million, or ppm. And then in 2021, at the top of this line here, they had risen all the way to 416 parts per million. And if you'll recall back a few years ago, when the global average had hit 400, it was sort of a red flag and it was a big deal. And now look where we are. And by the way, I just checked in June, we're now up to 426 parts per million. Over to the right are methane and nitrous oxide, other greenhouse gases. These are the short-lived greenhouse gases, which pack a bigger punch when it comes to their global warming potential, but they don't remain in the atmosphere like carbon dioxide. And California has 3 monitoring stations that also are monitoring for these greenhouse gases, and they overlay right on top of what's going on in Hawaii. And we have that as in the indicator in the report. A little ray of hope, the bright side, is that 220, our emissions reduction goal was, our 2020 emissions reduction goal was reached in 2016. And in 2019, our statewide emissions remain below this target. And we can thank the California Air Resources Board for doing a lot of good work here. So the next slide here shows that our ocean waters absorb carbon dioxide. And in doing so, this acidifies the waters. And we all probably know that you have a lower pH value when waters are more acidic. And so again, off of Hawaii, we're seeing since 1990s an uptick in CO2 concentrations in the water. And along with that, a downtick in pH, which means the waters are becoming more acidic. Also in California, the right-hand graphs, you'll see the bottom graph, 140 miles offshore. The triangles are the data points for our monitoring station. Really, they track very well with the Hawaii numbers. Whereas 20 miles offshore in California, you see a lot of variability. And this is because of a phenomenon called upwelling, which is where water close to the shore, deeper waters, are sort of pushed up, flushed up, and they're colder waters heavy with nutrients, which is great for the wildlife, but it also skews the numbers. You can't, you're not going to see as constant the numbers as you will because of this upwelling phenomenon. With ocean acidification, you've probably heard that acidified waters can disrupt shell formation in marine organisms such as mussels, oysters, and corals. They've seen this in the lab, and they're now just starting to see this happening in the real world in coastal waters, the fisher people who are fishing for these crustaceans. Okay, we'll move on now to a climate indicator, air temperature. What we're showing, we all know that, our temperatures are rising. And in fact, warming in this century in California has warmed at 2.5 degrees. But what we're showing here is a timeline from 1900s to 2020 by decade. And the bars below this average line are cooler years. So you can see minimum, which is the blue column, are nighttime temperatures. Red is the maximum daytime temperatures. So you see variability over the decades. The 30s, for whatever reason, was a really warm decade. But look what happens in the 1980s and beyond. We're seeing a huge increase in nighttime air temperatures. They're warming 3 times faster than daytime temperatures, which is an issue because it's harder for animals and humans to recover from the daytime heat. Temperatures are influenced by our natural landscape, elevation, proximity to the ocean, ocean currents, and atmospheric circulations. And we've all heard about the urban heat island effect, wherein the cities where asphalt and concrete is absorbing the heat and reflecting it back, we're experiencing even more difficult heat issues. So let's move on now to extreme heat, which we're all experiencing now, of course. Extreme heat events are days or nights that are unusually hot compared to historical data. We're using a time frame from 1960 to 1990. These heat maps show the number of extreme heat events each year since 1950, and in 14 locations across California. The upper heat map are daytime extreme heat events. The lower map is nighttime. And the colors, you know, you could see as the colors get darker, we're having more extreme heat events in those particular years. And you see Sacramento, I think you can see my cursor, right? Anyway.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. So you can see actually for the daytime extreme heat events, interestingly, we're finding they're hotter in Southern California, with the hottest let's see, get to it, at Edwards Air Force Base in San Diego, whereas the nighttime heat events, if you go to the bottom map here, interestingly, the hottest extreme event locations were at Blue Canyon up in Tahoe and the San Francisco airport. And if you look over at the left, this map of California shows the weather stations where they're monitoring for extreme heat, or just monitoring temperatures. So extreme heat, of course, affects our agriculture, water, power, and transportation systems. And according to a recent report released by the California Insurance Commissioner, extreme heat waves have cost Californians almost $8 billion over the last decade and killed nearly 460 people. So now I don't have a slide for precipitation, but just wanted to mention that precipitation is increasingly becoming more variable statewide since the 1980s. Again, the fraction of precipitation coming down as rain as opposed to snow is increased in the Sierras and the Southern Cascades. Therefore, we have less snowpack and less water available to us for our water supply. And with the extreme dry and wet years, we're finding more periods of drought and also local flooding. And speaking of drought, okay, are you seeing the whole slide here? Because I have I have a toolbar hiding things. Let me try and move that. Anyway,
Yeah.
let me see.
I think, yeah, if you're in presentation mode. Yeah, that's better.
That better?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
And here
no
Barbara
problem.
was showing me how to do all this yesterday. Okay. Let me get myself out of here. Okay. The next slide shows that offshore waters have warmed in the last 40 years, especially off of Southern California. La Jolla down here is having the hottest increase, the most increase in water temperatures. Oh, wait a minute, I was on drought. I'm sorry. I went down to water temperatures. Excuse me, sorry. This is the Palmer Drought Severity Index. This index measures relative dryness of a region by factoring temperature, precipitation, and soil moisture data. So here, the blue bars indicate years that were basically wetter years, had wetter months. The red bars below the zero line here were drier years. And as you see, as you go over time, we're getting drier and drier in California. From 2012 to 16, you might recall we had experienced the worst drought on record. And then we had a 3-year stretch from 2020, 21, and 22, where we had another dry spell. And if you look over here on the map, this was at the end of September 21. You can see the drought conditions throughout the state, with the dark red being an exceptional drought, which we were a part of, and then the lighter the colors, the less of a problem it was. But the whole state was really in a drought at that point. And as you know, drought conditions strain our water supplies, threaten our fish in rivers and streams, as we'll see, and increase tree deaths and wildfire risks. Okay, now I'll go down to the coastal ocean temperature. As I said, it's warming more in the southern part of California. And again, you'll see the blue areas here along the coast. And this is the upwelling that I mentioned along the coast that pushes the cold water up, is actually helping in terms of the warming, with the warming waters, because it's bringing that cold water up. So that's how you see these mixed trends near the shoreline. But in 2014 to 16, we had what was called a marine heat wave, which is also happening globally in areas. And during that time, we lost a lot of marine organisms, such as mammals, seabirds. Our commercially important fish were moving to areas where the waters were cooler, so away from the fisher people. We had a prolonged toxic algal bloom, which ended up closing our Dungeness crab fishery. And warming temperatures contribute to global sea level rise. So sorry about all this bad news. Glaciers provide the most visible evidence of climate change. Here we're showing in this graph up in the Trinity Alps. I never knew that the Trinity Alps even had mountain glaciers before I worked on this report. But there were 2 that we were looking at with researchers up there. The Grizzly Glacier, which is tracked by this brownish line, and the Salmon Glacier, tracked by this red line. And as you can see, between 1994 and in 2015, we totally lost the Salmon Glacier. That was during that extended drought period. And then the Grizzly Glacier had practically all but disappeared by the time we published this report. And just as we had published it, the research person we were working with said, guess what? We've lost the last glacier up in the Trinity Alps. So that was sad to hear. Also, snowfields, represented by the dotted lines, these 2 snowfields disappeared in that same drought period. So the surface, pardon me, someone say something? Oh, in the Sierra Nevada, the surface area of 7 of the largest glaciers have decreased dramatically during this past century. And over here on the right, this is the Sierra now. This is different from the Trinity Alps over here. On Mount Dana, this photograph of a glacier was taken in 1883. And then in 2021, a photographer took from the same angle, this glacier, and you can really see the dramatic decrease in glacial ice. And we have in the indicator report photographs of several of the glaciers and what's happened from the early 1900s to modern day times. And it's all hard to see. I hear some voices in the background, but so glacial runoff provides critical cold freshwater habitat for Chinook salmon populations and other aquatic species, and water for vegetation during the summer months, which is really important. Okay. So the next indicator here shows wildfires in California. And the annual average area burned in the last 2 decades, as you can see over on this graph over here, is at least double that of earlier decades. In 2021, the red bar over here to the right, the average area is about 5 times higher than in the 2010s in that decade. If you recall, in 2020, there was that huge August fire and a bunch of fires across the strait burning simultaneously. It was horrible. That was the year of COVID too. And if you look over at these maps, you can see from the 1950s to 90s, the area burn. I think I can expand this a little bit. I guess not. You can see the area burn in this 40-year period compared to the area burned in the 2000s and 2000, the last 2 decades. So fires in recent years have caused about a 15% drop in the tree count in the sequoia trees up in the Sierras. And this loses a lot of carbon storage capacity for us. Forests absorb carbon from the atmosphere, which is, a good thing. And this increase in number and severity of wildfires throughout the Western United States has led scientists to warn us that this region is now entering into an era of megafires. Again, sorry about all this bad news. Okay. Chinook salmon populations are threatened by warming temperatures in freshwater streams, the rivers, and in the ocean. This graph shows Salmon River Chinook salmon up in the Trinity Alps area, and this is spring run salmon. Salmon migrate back from the ocean where they are living for a couple of years to feed and become adults, and they migrate back at certain seasons. In this case, we're looking at the spring run salmon where they've come back to spawn. And since 2011, you can see here, the numbers have really started to decline. And then in recent years, the numbers are way down, which has been very upsetting to the tribal people up there, as well as the people living there who rely on salmon for their food. And this has been a very sad thing for them. In 2022, the spring run salmon here were declared threatened by the state. The Salmon River is a good one to look at because there's no dams feeding into it that help replenish it. There's no mining activities or water diversions or other human activities that are influencing what might be going on here. So the scientists think that it's definitely warming waters that are causing these declines in salmon counts. Just want to mention that in the Sacramento River, not shown here, salmon abundance has fluctuated over the last 4 decades. And because there are hatcheries and cold water dam releases, and even at times they've shipped, you've probably heard, the juvenile salmon down to the ocean because they're not going to survive the warm waters going down the rivers and streams to the ocean. All these interventions have helped sustain the Sacramento River salmon. But they're fighting a losing battle with some of the runs. I think the winter run salmon are really threatened in spite of all the things that we're doing to try and keep them going. I hope I'm not taking up too much time here. Okay, this slide shows how small mammals and birds up in the Sierras in 3 regions are changing their elevational ranges due to a number of factors, but warming is undoubtedly a big reason, because in many cases, they're going to higher elevations. We were fortunate enough to have data, field study data from the turn of the century, where people had gone out, scientists had gone out in northern, central, and southern Sierras and done population counts and their distribution of these small mammals and birds. So that's how we know now that close to 75% of small mammals and close to 85% of birds are now in different elevations. In addition to the Sierras, down in the Mojave Desert, where things are getting hotter and drier, they're seeing desert bird communities that are collapsing, while small mammal communities are still remaining stable. The bird communities are collapsing, they believe, because they're not getting there's less vegetation and not enough refuge for them to escape the heat. These pictures do a kind of a poor job of showing from 1938 and 2017, showing that there's less vegetation there, but there is. The mammals are able to, burrow under the soil and escape the heat, so they're doing okay for now. So let's move on to a couple of human health impacts. Wildfire smoke. As you know, the smoke contains toxic gases, particulates, and other pollutants. And these exposures are increasing. Scientists can estimate potential population exposures using satellite imagery of smoke plumes. So this graph to the right presents person days, which estimates the number of people living where smoke plumes were present and for how long. And as you can see, since 2010, it's increasing, peaking in 2020. Again, that big fire year, fires were raging that year. And smoke plumes in 2020 covered every county for at least 46 days, which was just unbelievable. And the maps over here show from 2010 to 14, the amount of smoke days per year. 2016 to 2020, you see how it's increasing even more. The darker the colors, the more days of smoke per year. And then in 2020, boom, look what we were experiencing, between 91 and 130 days per year for a lot of the state. The smoke from the fires actually kills more people than the flames. And a UCLA study recently estimated that smoke likely contributed to more than 52,000 premature deaths across California from 2008 to 2018. And that did not even include 2020. So I'm sure those numbers would have changed things that year. Okay. Valley fever cases have increased over the past 20 years in California, almost fivefold from 2001 to 2022. This graph doesn't include the data from 2022. It's been updated. Valley fever is caused by a fungus in the soil, and when the soil is disturbed, fungal spores are released into the air, and when they are breathed in by people and animals, they can infect them and cause this fever. Symptoms are fatigue, cough, trouble breathing, fever, and they're similar to other respiratory illnesses. So valley fever cases are probably underdiagnosed because of that. Each year in California, around 80 deaths and over 1,000 hospitalizations are attributed to valley fever. The incidence is highest in the southern San Joaquin Valley and parts of the Central Coast. Barbara mentioned to me yesterday that she's read that more cases are occurring closer to the Sacramento area. Maybe she can chime in with that later. But why climate change? Drought, dry soil, wildfires, and other climatic changes likely enhance the release of these spores from the dirt and make them airborne for people to breathe in. And our last slide, occupational heat-related illness. Gosh, I hope you aren't seeing this little black square up here that I'm looking at. heat-related illnesses are increasing. These are self-reported. These are based on worker comp claims that were given to the California Department of Public Health helped us with this metric. The highest rates are reported in the counties of Los Angeles, San Diego, and Imperial. Illnesses often occur for employees who have little control over their work environment and limited ability to take any actions when working under hot conditions. So most are ag workers, construction workers, frontline workers such as police, and firefighters, of course, firefighters. In 2005, in response to a series of heat-related deaths with farm workers, California enacted a heat-related illness prevention standard for outdoor workers, requiring employers provide heat illness training, access to water, shade, and rest. And again, with occupational illnesses, we know that these are underdiagnosed because a lot of workers are undocumented and they're fearful of reporting illnesses and losing work. So that's it for the indicators. OEA has collaborated with California tribal nations to provide their perspectives on climate change and its effects on tribal lands and life. Tribal knowledge and its long-term perspective passed down through generations advances the understanding of climate change and informs policies and action. Sorry, I wanted to read that because that was so well written. And, you know, kind of interesting things that they've told us. And the report has a huge section at the end. It's close to 200 pages on the stories that the tribes have told us about the changing climate and what it's doing to their people, their culture, and their lands. A couple of things: sea level rise has blocked and restricted access to traditional sites along the shoreline. Cultural artifacts have been exposed due to sea level rise and coastal erosion. Warming ocean temperatures have, caused kelp forests to collapse. And of course, a big issue with the tribes are the Chinook salmon and how these populations are threatened by warming temperatures in the oceans and in the rivers. So with that, I will leave it open to questions now. And I will stop sharing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Karen. That was
Thank you.
really an excellent talk. We have maybe time for 2 or 3 questions. It's easier for me to see folks if you raise your electronic hand, and you can do that by going to the bottom of your screen where it says reactions, and then the raise hand will pop up, and then you'll come to the top of my screen, and I can see Luke is first in line.
Yeah, I'm interested. Does anybody know what the possibilities of these glaciers coming back? I mean, what has to happen? It seems like maybe there's really nothing that can bring them back. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's why when the scientists that we were talking with up in the Trinity Alps, I mean, they were literally in tears when they told us that last grizzly glacier was gone. I mean, those were iconic glaciers, and the Trinity Alps were really special, the glaciers there, because those Alps are near the ocean, and it's a Mediterranean climate. And because though the Alps are so steep walled, they were able to maintain over the decades, over the centuries, those glaciers. So no, I don't think, I mean, maybe, I mean, you hear about in Antarctica, the glaciers are gaining, sometimes they gain, but I don't think mountain glaciers are capable of gaining, ice again. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I wanted to say, I will put in the chat a link to the OEHA website where you can access this report. And what's nice is there are 2-page summaries of the 42 6 indicators so that you can just get a snapshot of them, because it's a huge, dense technical report, and you can just get the bottom line from these 2-page summaries.
Excellent. Yeah, that'd be really helpful. And we'll put that in the newsletter too. I think we all need to be aware of this incredible report. Any
Sorry,
other
I went over the
questions?
time.
No, it was terrific. Yeah. Any other questions from folks? I hope, again, I can't quite see you all, so I'm just doing a quick. Well, okay, so because I'm running this meeting, I'll ask the last question. And that is, this information is so important and really brings home the urgency of, I'm sorry, Maureen has your hand up. Maureen, what question do you
Yeah,
have?
I just wanted to thank you so much. It was just the perfect amount of detail, and thank you so much. So informative.
Oh, you're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Sorry, I had to read a little bit off of notes because it's been a few years since I worked on this, and there's so many details, like, so.
Yeah.
But go
Excellent.
ahead, you were saying, Diana, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just, I wonder if the legislature actually reads this. I know with Trina Lee, who's on this call, we've been looking at climate voting records of our state legislature, and even some of the Democrats aren't voting consistently in favor of climate legislation. And we've seen some really important bills die in the legislature. Is OEHA required to distribute this to our
Oh yes, it's mandated actually by the governor's office. So yes, everyone, I mean, we used to have, pre-COVID, we would have actually paper documents that we would send all over the place. And now it's such a long document, we honestly don't think people are going to read it. That's why we have the 2-page summaries now. I suspect legislative staff would read some of this, at least the summaries, hopefully. So yeah, but at least, as I was saying in one of the early slides, they're using this to inform the state mitigation plan and the adaptation plan, and actually localities we have in some of the indicators, we have local data so that local agencies or departments can use this in their mitigation programs.
Excellent. And we can always use this too when we visit legislators. So it's so terrific to know about the report. Thank you again, Karen. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I felt like we needed to hear. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne. Did you have a quick comment?
I did. Besides the legislators, once we get our Speakers Bureau or our efforts to recruit more members and speak to them, are these slides copyrighted? Are we allowed to borrow them and use them in our speaking to groups to talk about climate change?
Oh, the person that I worked with, who was the lead on this, provided me this whole slide deck.
Okay.
I'll run it by her, but it was, she's used them in public meetings and things. So I'm sure that's going to not be, and we may have better graphs too, because the 2-page summaries I'm talking about, 18 of them have been updated. Unfortunately, this slide deck I'm using, they weren't updated to today's, with using more, more data points. So those would be better graphs, in fact.
Wonderful. Thank you. Like Maureen said, it's a good amount of information.
Pat? Did you have your hand up? Oh, you're on mute.
Karen, I also want to thank you. That was thorough. That was sobering. You apologized a couple of times, maybe a few times, for the downer aspect to it.
For the what aspect?
The sobering aspect.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think you need to do that. I think that it's really important that we know the situation that we're in. It's really clear we're in an emergency and we aren't acting as if it's an emergency. And I really appreciate the data and the grounding you provide so that it becomes even more evident how widespread our difficulty is. And it really begs the question of, well, what are the causes? And how can we address those causes? And what are the highest leverages? And people ask those questions when they realize how dire the situation is. And so your evidence really brings those questions to the fore. And I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for your part in making that evident to people. So thank
Well,
you.
we can actually thank all these researchers in the universities, in the state and federal agencies. I mean, they provided so much help, their data, their expertise. I mean, our learning curves were like this for these things, because it was, if you read the full document, it's quite technical. So it was like going back to school again. But so, yeah.
Great. Well, I felt like the presentation was so important. We are a little bit over, and I understand if people need to leave at 7, but I would like to go through the call for volunteers just because it gives anybody new a chance to hear how they can get more plugged in to what we're doing with Third Act to protect the climate and democracy. So, you know, I'm going to go a tiny bit out of order just to give Karen a little break. And Maureen, can we start with you? Are you going to give the report on climate finance or the call for volunteers?
Yeah, sure. I can do that.
Thanks.
So hello, everyone. Karen apologized for reading, and I'm going to read this whole thing, and I'm not going to apologize. So yeah, I along with Pat Ferris kind of are on the climate finance team at the time, and we are really hopeful that we can interest others in joining it. The focus of our team is on the financial enablers of the fossil fuel industry. And what we've learned is that there's really 3 pillars that underpin the continued extraction of fossil fuels. Those are the financial institutions, such as banks and asset managers, such as Vanguard. Insurance companies are also implicated because they not only insure the dirty fossil fuel companies, but they also invest our premium dollars right back into those fossil companies. So they invest in the companies as well as insuring them. The third pillar and requirement for a project to go forward are permits. Depending upon the nature of the project, permits can be issued by the Department of Energy, FERC, or local agencies such as CalGEM. We don't work directly on the permitting. Our little climate finance is pretty much focused on insurance companies and financial institutions, but we do collaborate with other organizations such as Last Chance Alliance that do directly address the permitting process. Our work is varied and it can be very exciting. And our need for additional volunteers is great. We meet monthly with Third Act Central and members of the Third Act climate finance teams nationwide. So every working group has a climate finance team, and we meet monthly to share ideas and strategies and build community. We have worked the past few years on the Move Your Money campaign. This work is predicated on the Banking on Climate Chaos report. And I'm going to put a document in the chat that has links to some of these items. So the Move Your Money campaign is predicated on the Banking on Climate Chaos report, which is issued yearly. And it details the largest lenders to the fossil fuel companies. This provides clear targets for our work. Year after year, we see 4 banks in the United States leading that list. They are Citibank, Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. So what do? We researched the banks to identify alternative banking opportunities and have developed a document providing this information. This document needs to be looked at periodically and updated with new information. And that's one of the research areas that our team works on. Let's see, in collaboration with another organization called This Is What We Did, we provide step-by-step guidance in moving money from one institution to another. We take part in digital campaigns to email, text, and make calls to the CEOs and chief sustainability officers in some of these financial institutions. We work tightly with the Connections and Actions team to provide educational materials and inform the general public at farmers markets, festivals, and directly at bank locations. We protest outside and inside of banks to bring attention to the gravity of the climate crisis. We collaborate with several coalitions who support this work. Some of these include Stop the Money Pipeline, the Oil and Gas Action Network, and Ensure Our Future, and Extinction Rebellion San Francisco. We join with others around the Bay Area to support various actions, including protests, education, and street theater, including lamenting. We have developed a vibrant, nonviolent direct action network, which provides resources, tools, and community to go the next step of disrupting these enabling institutions. Please let me know if you're interested in joining this network and their bi-weekly meetings. We feel that we need to get a little bit in the way. We need to be disruptive because what we've been doing in the past is not working, but we haven't moved the banks. The Summer of Heat campaign is going on right now. It's a sustained 3-month campaign centered in New York City. There have been many distributed actions that have accompanied and amplified the work going on in New York City. And the primary target is Citibank, though we're also focusing on other banks and financial institutions. I'm going to drop, we're short on time, so I'm going to drop links about that campaign in the document. So I'll end now so that we can move on and the other people that have reports can provide those reports.
Thanks very much, Maureen. I love a good demonstration, so I am a part of that team too. If you're interested in joining it, go ahead and put your name in the chat and we'll contact you, or you can contact Maureen directly. All right, so Laura had to leave. We have a whole a mighty team working on state legislation, and she'll send out an update about where we are. We're kind of wrapping up the state legislative session right now, but there are a few bills that we still need your help on. So we'll send out calls for either speakers if you'd like to join us at the Capitol, or letters. And again, she told me she'll know more on Friday, so we'll update you via email then. Marianne, do you want to tell us about senior to senior and any voter registration?
Sure. We do have a couple of voter registrations going on this summer at the Concerts in the Park at Cesar Chavez Park. And one is coming up this Friday night, and the following one will be the following Friday night. That's the last concert in the park for the year. And thousands, well, at least over 1,000 people show up at these concerts, and they're just such a diverse crowd, age-wise and so on. We're really trying to increase the youth vote. That's what Senior to Senior does. And so we're hoping we can get a lot of voters registered at those two concerts. We have the people to register, but if you are interested in further activities with Senior to Senior, I'll put my name and email address in the chat and you can find out about that. Otherwise, we're going to be starting up in late August for going into the high schools, as we have been doing over the last 3 years. And we have about 25 high schools in the local area that we visit, if not once or twice a year. And we speak to government classes. So we have a captive audience of seniors to be registered. And the county may be doing a mock election this coming fall, but it doesn't really impede us too much because we can go to the schools that they don't reach, and we'll have plenty to do. The only thing that is in my mind is that the youth vote has become a little controversial because of the Palestinian issue, and we don't hear much about it now because the colleges are not in session right now, and high schoolers do what college students, they jump with their older brothers and sisters. And so we fear a little bit about the vote for Biden in the early fall. But I think that when all things are said and done and people are reading the 2025 report, the youth will definitely make a decision on the side of the more supportive of democracy and so on. I'm trusting. Anyway, that's all I have to say, and I will put my name in the chat and let me know if you're interested in joining us.
Thanks so much, Marianne. Goalie, do you want to say anything about connections and actions?
Sure. Hi. Yes. My name is Goalie. We have 2 co-leads with our Connections and Actions team, and basically we do a lot of different things, and we collaborate with most of the other teams, and our focus is on organizing both the actions, demonstrations, but also informing the public at different events. And for example, the concerts in the park, we're going to be registering voters. We've done various different events and community celebrations. We go and table and let people know and hand out flyers about what they can do about the climate and introduce them to Third Act. We also, if you're somebody who likes art, we do a lot of art builds, work on making signs, puppets. We did the rocking chair rebellion, so folks got to paint colorful rocking chairs that we gathered, and we used that. We used them we had a demonstration in front of 3 banks, and we had it in front of Citibank on Alhambra. So the upcoming things, we also try to help coordinate some of the postcard parties, help out with the other teams. So if you guys are interested and want to have a diversity of things that you do, including art, and then this team would be great. We'd love to have you. And so I just have some events that are coming up for people. If you're interested, we have the postcard parties. I think the next one in Midtown is at Mishi's house, July 23rd, 6 to 8 p.m. And if you live closer to Land Park, Linda's having multiple per month. Linda Hayward, she's our postcard party queen. I think you said, Linda, that in June you had 741 postcards that went out, and she has already had 250 sent out this month, and she has 3 more parties coming up in July. So if you're interested in hanging out with a bunch of people that are like-minded and also like to write postcards to inform folks, let us know. I'm gonna put my email in the chat if you're interested. And then we have, I think, let's see, Marianne already mentioned this as a Chavez Park registrations that are coming up this Friday and the following Friday. Let us know if you want to be part of that. And then we have the Summer of Heat that Maureen mentioned. We have local solidarity actions coming up with other organizations. And there's two coming up, one July 26th. It's going to be at 10, let's see, we're going to meet at 10:30 at Crocker Park, July 26th and August 16th. Both of them are Fridays, and we have we have permits at the Capitol, and we're going to have varied events, anywhere from going to Wells Fargo Bank, and all the way to those. Some of the ideas haven't been solidified yet for the August 16th, but they should be fun. We're going to have demonstration as well as speakers, and we are having you can bring a t-shirt on the 26th and actually do your own silk screen. We're getting that all in collaboration with the youth, the high school and youth Fridays for Future and other organizations, 350 Sacramento. Anyway, I can go on and on, but thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Goalie. I call that the fun team. Their official name is Connections and Actions, but they have a lot of fun. So, so I'm going to call on Luke and then Karen just as a lead-in to our after party, since we'll be talking about phone banking. So, Luke, do you have anything quick to say about any volunteers you need for making phone calls or recruitment?
Well, we can always use people to make phone calls, because what we found out is that we get the most bang for our buck with phone calls. Sending out email, if you send out 50 emails, you get maybe 2 responses. If you make 10 phone calls, you get 4. So it's quite a difference. So anyone interested in making phone calls, and we're going to be making phone calls to get some people to a Get Out the Vote meeting, where you can get some training for phone canvassing. And we also need some people. We're almost caught up with our welcoming calls, but we could use a few more people for that as well. So let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. And if you want to make some calls, they're fun calls to make because they're to third actors that are just dying to hear from you. So I'll put my name in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Luke. Okay, we're sort of caught up here on time. Good for you for sticking around. I'm going to ask Karen, who's a co-lead of the Get Out the Vote team, to kind of do her call for volunteers and maybe talk briefly about phone banking. And then we'll open it up to questions for folks, those of you who are considering phone banking and aren't quite sure if you want to do it. So take it away, Karen.
Okay, well, honestly, with the phone banking, well, first of all, the postcard writing has been gangbusters, so we've been really happy about that. But now moving on to phone banking, Barbara and I have been relying a bit on Luke. I've never phone banked, Barbara has. I feel like I definitely want a training. In fact, I've signed up for the one on the 24th with Environmental Voter Project. So Barbara and I worked on a letter that was just sent out to a list of people that Luke gave us who had at one time expressed an interest in phone banking. We've heard back from one person. So I guess, I don't know, Luke, I mean, I don't know if there's other ways we can solicit phone banking.
Yeah, well, we're gonna try to call those people,
Yeah,
Karen.
Put the
So
pressure.
that'll help. And
Okay.
yeah, so that's another way to go about it.
Right.
And we might have some other. You've got a pretty good list for Get Out the Vote people, and
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then we've got the people that want to make phone calls as well. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
try to call as many of those people as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Barbara's very interested in this. She's just been real busy with family stuff recently, so it's sort of been not at the top of her list of items. But and one thing, oh, Barbara wanted me to mention this as she was driving back today. She feeling very down and distressed about the whole presidential race. And she thinks it's very important that we make an effort to try and flip these House seats in California. I mean, if there's a good chance of that, because we just have to try and get the House if we're going to have Trump as president. So, you know, was just wanted to get that off of her chest. So she thinks we should look more towards getting out House votes here rather than maybe going up to Nevada, or if we're doing door-to-door canvassing. And you wanted to see what you all thought about that.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think, I mean, there are lots of ways to get involved in the elections. I know everyone's kind of freaked out and the news seems to be more bizarre by the day. I just wanted to draw attention to a document that Luke posted in the chat about ways you can get involved. And Third Act is one of those ways, but not the only way. And so Karen and Barbara are co-team leads of the Get Out the Vote team for Third Act, and we're transitioning. I mean, I think we'll continue to do the postcarding, but for those of you who do want to phone bank and maybe haven't done it before, do you have any questions about that? And think about that. And I see Patricia has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of getting the vote out in California, the California Alliance of Retired Americans has been doing postcarding, and they have a big list. So just to, if you don't want to have to start from scratch, they, I'm sure they could probably use some help too, or we could use some help. I've been doing some of those for them. So that's to get voters out in districts where there's might be a Republican, and then we're trying to flip it or something like that.
Yeah, Patricia, could you send a link to that group to Karen, or put a link in the chat maybe?
Yeah, I'll put it,
because that sounds like a group. If it's senior oriented, we should be looking into that for sure.
Yeah, they are seniors, and they people with disabilities.
Okay, that's great. Good, thanks. So I've got a few ideas about this. First of all, I put in the chat the document that Barbara and Karen put together that gives you a lot of different opportunities, organizations that are doing good work. Most of them have been doing postcarding, and we've been doing really well in our postcarding, but the election season's heating up and the phones work better than postcarding, and knocking on doors works better than phones. So we need to step it up. And Karen, do you have that link to the Environmental Voter Project training that's going to take place? If you have that, if you could put that in the chat, that would be good. Environmental Voter Project is a really good group to get involved with, and Karen and Barbara have been talking with them.